Take a breath and allow yourself to be still for just a moment before you continue moving through your day. Because something brought you here right now, and it is worth pausing to consider that this arrival may carry more meaning than it appears to on the surface. These words, this particular moment, this exact intersection of your thoughts and what is unfolding before you right now, none of it feels entirely accidental. There may be something in you that has been quietly searching, something beneath the daily noise of your life that has been seeking a form of confirmation for what it already senses to be true. So before your mind begins racing to analyze and explain everything, simply allow yourself to receive what is being offered here. There is someone connected to your life who carries a love for you that runs genuinely deep. A person who, for reasons that have everything to do with their own inner world and very little to do with you, has chosen to hold themselves at a distance. Perhaps this is someone from your past. Perhaps someone who once stood in a place of real closeness to your heart. What matters is that their feelings have not diminished with time or distance. If anything, the feelings have intensified even as the gap between you has remained. Their silence is not emptiness. Their withdrawal is not indifference. Beneath the quiet surface of how they appear to have moved on, there is a depth of feeling that continues to overflow in the private spaces of their inner life, spaces they do not often allow anyone to see. As their feelings have deepened, so has the impulse to retreat. This is the paradox that lives at the center of their experience of you. Loving you has become simultaneously the most meaningful thing they have ever allowed themselves to feel and the most frightening thing they have ever had to face. Those two realities exist side by side inside them without resolving into anything clean or simple. They keep their distance not because you mean little, but precisely because you mean so much. You reach something in them that had been locked away for years, something that lived behind emotional walls they had spent a long time carefully building and reinforcing. You touched a part of them they had almost forgotten was there. You changed them in ways they never anticipated and are still trying to fully understand. Not because you tried to, not through any particular strategy or effort on your part. Simply by being who you are in their presence, you awakened something in them that had been dormant. You helped them recognize dimensions of themselves they had never shown to another person. You created enough safety without demanding it be acknowledged that their walls began to feel less necessary around you. And that is no small thing. For someone who built their sense of security around emotional self-containment, finding that their defenses no longer held in your presence was both a revelation and a source of genuine fear. You are not simply another person who passed through their life. You are something closer to a mirror, one that reflects back to them both what they most deeply desire and what they are most afraid of. In your presence they saw their own longing clearly, perhaps for the first time. They also saw their wounds. They saw the places inside themselves that were still unhealed, still tender, still capable of producing the old familiar pain if they allowed themselves to become vulnerable enough. You did not place those things there, but your presence made them impossible to avoid looking at. And for someone who had become very practiced at not looking, that was its own kind of crisis. They had not planned for you. You arrived in their life and rearranged something in them that had been settled, however uncomfortably, in a particular arrangement. The spark that appeared in your exchanges, the unusual quality of calm they felt in your company, the slow and then sudden awareness that your absence would register in them as a loss unlike others they had known. These were not things they had budgeted for. These were not feelings they knew how to categorize or manage within the framework they had built for keeping themselves safe. So their response was the only one their system knew how to generate when emotional exposure exceeded their capacity to hold it. They created distance. This distance is not a statement about your worth. It is a statement about the intensity of what they feel. They remain at a remove not because the connection lacks power, but because the connection holds too much of it for them to stand inside it without feeling overwhelmed. You became the one person whose words and thoughts carry more weight with them than they are comfortable acknowledging. Your opinion matters to them in a way that other people's opinions do not. and that mattering feels dangerous to someone who learned early in life that giving another person that kind of significance is how you make yourself vulnerable to being badly hurt. In many ways, you represent something they are not yet fully prepared to face about themselves. For someone whose sense of self is constructed partly on emotional self-sufficiency, loving you can feel like standing at the edge of something they cannot see the bottom of. They want to leap, and they are paralyzed, so they stay frozen at the edge, present enough to feel everything and distant enough to maintain the illusion of control. There is also something they carry that operates more quietly, but runs just as deep. A belief that you deserve someone more emotionally evolved than they currently are. Someone more healed, more settled, more capable of showing up consistently in the ways that a genuine relationship requires. They replay their own past behavior with a harsh and unforgiving eye. They revisit conversations and moments with a clarity that was not available to them when those moments were actually happening. They see where they fell short, where fear steered them in directions that cost something real, where the choices they made out of self-protection created damage they now genuinely regret. Inside the silence they maintain, there is a persistent internal voice telling them they are not ready, that they need more time to become the version of themselves that is worthy of what they feel you deserve. That voice keeps them rooted in place, waiting for a version of themselves they are convinced will eventually arrive and finally make the leap feel justifiable. But healing, as most people discover, does not arrive on schedule. And the waiting that feels like preparation is very often simply fear dressed in more acceptable clothing. No matter how far they have placed themselves from the immediate reality of you, you remain a fixed presence in their inner world. You do not fade the way other things fade. Every attempt to redirect their attention away from what they feel toward you has ultimately fallen short. Other connections have been tried. Other distractions have been pursued. But none of them carry the particular quality that you carry. None of them reach the place inside them that you reached. Their heart remains attached to the essence of what existed between you, even while their mind continues cataloging all the reasons why allowing themselves to fully acknowledge that attachment is dangerous. There is something in psychology that speaks to this dynamic, the observation that what we resist tends to grow stronger rather than weaker through our resistance. The more they have attempted to suppress or argue themselves out of what they feel, the more persistently it has presented itself to their awareness. The connection has embedded itself more deeply through their efforts to dislodge it. Their silence holds within it entire conversations that have never been given voice. Old disappointments and old wounds that taught them proximity to another person usually ends in some form of loss or pain. Because of those earlier lessons, you feel to them like something precious and simultaneously dangerous, something worth protecting from their own potential to damage it. They are in the process of testing themselves, trying to discover whether they are genuinely capable of standing on their own before they learn how to stand beside someone else without disappearing into that person or dragging them under with the weight of unresolved things. Beneath whatever calm or composed exterior they present to the world, there are nights where the weight of everything left unsaid becomes almost unbearable. Nights where they understand with a clarity that daylight tends to obscure that one honest step toward you would change the entire trajectory of their life. And that is exactly what makes it so difficult to take. Transformation on that scale is terrifying, even when it is also the thing the heart most wants. They have written things they never sent, composed messages, and then deleted them before anyone could read them. Paused over your name with the intention of reaching out, and then retreated back into silence because the courage required for that movement was not quite available in that moment. They have rehearsed conversations in their mind, imagining every possible version of how things might unfold, including the ones where they are rejected or where their return comes too late. They live in those imagined dialogues with a level of detail that reveals just how much mental and emotional energy they are continuing to invest in the reality of you. Part of them wants to close the distance immediately. Another part of them remains held in place by the fear of what closing the distance would actually require them to risk. This tension does not resolve. It continues day after day, a low-level internal pressure that never fully disappears regardless of what else is happening in their life. What they rarely allow themselves to admit, even in the privacy of their own thoughts, is that your impact on them did not diminish with time. Circumstances shifted. Life moved forward in the external sense. But the imprint you left inside them has not faded. It surfaces unexpectedly in the middle of ordinary days, in a piece of music that carries the quality of something you shared, in a quiet moment when the usual distractions fall away and what remains in the space is an awareness of you, in memories that return with a vividness that surprises them. The more they attempt to file you away as something that belongs to a completed chapter, the more clearly they feel that this is not accurate. Some connections do not complete. Some bonds change shape and evolve and deepen even through separation and silence. For now, they exist in the territory between fear and desire, between the impulse to protect themselves and the pull towards something they have never been able to fully dismiss. But something in the balance is shifting. The truth they have been carefully managing is gradually becoming more demanding. Their heart is asking for a different kind of honesty. The walls they built have sustained damage they can no longer fully repair. Something is moving toward an inevitable point of reckoning, a moment when silence will no longer be sufficient to hold the weight of everything they are feeling. When that moment arrives, it will not be because they finally achieved the perfection they have been waiting for. It will be because they finally understood something they have been circling for a long time. That love was never holding its breath, waiting for them to be flawless. It was simply waiting for them to choose honesty over the particular safety of hiding. And even in the midst of their fear, there is a lingering question they cannot let go of. Whether you still feel the connection. Whether what existed between you still carries any living warmth from your side. Whether the door remains open, or whether their silence has finally cost them the thing they never actually stopped wanting. They feel a persistent emotional thread between you they can't fully dismiss, fear losing you permanently despite the distance they created to protect the connection, and slowly realize that the very separation meant to preserve it is now what is eroding it. They exist inside a painful contradiction that they have not yet found their way out of. Running from what they most want, staying silent about what they most need to say. Denying themselves access to the love that has the most genuine potential to shift something fundamental inside them. Because somewhere beneath all of the self-protective architecture, there is a voice that has never fully believed they deserve something this real. That they are the kind of person who gets to have love this genuine without it eventually revealing some flaw in them that makes it all collapse. If they appear distant or disconnected or difficult to reach, understand that the exterior presentation is armor. It is not who they are. It is a mechanism they developed long before they ever knew you, built from lessons learned when they were less equipped to understand what those lessons were actually teaching them. They learned that showing emotion openly carried risk, that needing other people created exposure, that loving without reservation was how you set yourself up for the particular pain of losing something you allowed yourself to fully want. So walls were built, high and well maintained, and then you appeared and moved through those walls with an ease that genuinely frightened them. Not through force, not through pressure or strategy, simply through the quality of who you are, which is why every attempt they have made to rebuild those walls in your specific direction has ultimately failed. Their heart keeps returning to you regardless of what their mind instructs it to do. They tell themselves they are waiting for the right moment, but somewhere inside they understand that no moment ever arrives pre-packaged with the particular kind of certainty they are waiting for. They keep allowing time to accumulate, believing that more preparation will eventually produce the readiness they cannot seem to manufacture. But time is not delivering what they hoped it would. Each day of waiting generates more distance rather than less. Each period of silence increases rather than reduces the difficulty of finally speaking. They carry an image of themselves returning to you one day in a state of complete confidence, standing before you brave and honest and certain, knowing exactly what to say and how to say it. But life does not pause for that level of preparation to complete. Love does not hold in place waiting for someone to finish becoming ready, and they are slowly coming to understand, even as the understanding is still uncomfortable, that waiting for a perfected version of themselves is how people lose what matters most. They can feel the pull of life moving them in your direction, even as fear continues to resist that movement. They are trying to find enough internal quiet to hear the deeper truth beneath the noise of their own anxiety. They are arriving at a crossroads where they must make a genuine choice between continuing to live behind the walls they constructed or finally surrendering to a connection that has outlasted every attempt to let it fade. They wonder at times whether you have grown strong enough in their absence to not need them anymore, whether you found your own peace, whether you are living fully without the unresolved weight of what exists between you. That possibility produces a particular kind of pain in them, one they are slow to acknowledge even internally. In some ways, as strange as this sounds, staying silent and living with regret feels less dangerous to them than reaching out and discovering they waited past the point of return. But beneath every layer of hesitation and self-protective reasoning, beneath every story they have told themselves about why this is not the right time and why they are not yet ready and why the risk is too great, one thing has remained completely unchanged. They never stopped loving you. The distance was never a product of weakening feeling. It was a product of feeling that grew too large for them to manage within the framework of emotional safety they had built for themselves. The connection exceeded their capacity to hold it without falling apart, and so they stepped back to gather themselves. They are not gone from your story in any permanent sense. They are in the process of building something, slowly and imperfectly accumulating the internal resources that will eventually allow them to move toward you with something more solid than fear. Every day they are engaged in a private struggle between the old voice that insists on staying hidden and the deeper voice that has never stopped knowing what they actually want. And gradually the balance is shifting. The old certainties about distance providing safety are beginning to feel less certain. What they are learning through all of this is something genuinely difficult. That silence does not protect love. That emotional armor does not preserve connection. That the distance they believed would give them clarity has instead given them an increasingly vivid sense of what they are missing. The walls that once felt like protection are beginning to feel like a prison they locked themselves inside. The isolation that once felt like strength is revealing itself as one of the most significant sources of pain in their life. Being separated from you has functioned as a mirror in ways they did not anticipate. It has placed them face to face with themselves without the usual distractions available to soften that encounter. And what they have seen in that reflection has been uncomfortable and honest and ultimately necessary. They are being dismantled in the way that anything has to be partially dismantled before it can be rebuilt into something more capable and more true. The masks they wore and the habits they maintained and the defenses they relied on are being examined and found insufficient. What they called strength for so long, the emotional shutdown, the maintained distance, the performance of indifference, they are beginning to recognize as forms of survival rather than genuine living. They think about how they felt in your presence, and the contrast with how they have felt in your absence is no longer something they can minimize. You offered them something they did not know how to receive at the time, something genuine and unhurried and real. Around you, something in them felt it was allowed to simply exist without the performance, without the maintenance of image, without the constant management of how much of themselves they revealed. And they did not know what to do with that kind of safety when it was available to them. What they feared most was never actually that you would leave. Their deepest fear was disappointment, failing you, showing you who they really were, and discovering that who they really were was not enough. They were afraid you would look clearly at them and find something they would not be able to explain or justify or repair. What they are slowly learning is that you never required that from them. You never asked for a perfected version. You wanted the real one. And love, genuine love, has always been about exactly that. Not flawlessness, but willingness. Not having every answer, but showing up honestly and choosing truth even when it costs something. The weight of their own choices accumulates each morning. Each day that begins without you carries a specific kind of heaviness that they can no longer attribute to anything other than the honest recognition of what their fear has cost them. Every evening, when the daily noise settles and silence arrives, their thoughts move toward you with a consistency that does not waver regardless of how much else is happening in their life. They understand now that what you shared was not something that arrives easily or often. They understand that the distance they created has not brought them the clarity or control they believed it would. Instead, it has slowly eroded something they now recognize as genuinely rare. The fears are losing their grip day by day. Not quickly and not cleanly, but steadily. The heart is finding its voice. The silence is developing cracks. Something inside them is orienting toward a moment of genuine change. A moment when staying in place becomes less possible than moving forward. A moment when the weight of everything they have been avoiding becomes heavier than the weight of finally turning toward it. When that moment comes, they will not arrive in it halfway or hedged or still holding part of themselves in reserve. They will arrive fully and honestly, carrying everything they have learned through the long and difficult process of being away from you. Because what they feel for you is not a passing thing. It has never been temporary or uncertain at its core. It carries the quality of something that recognizes itself, a bond that has continued to exist through silence and distance and time in a way that ordinary feelings simply do not persist. The silence that once offered them the feeling of safety is growing heavier with every passing day. And the day is coming when they will finally choose what their heart has been choosing all along.